Hello, my lovely children. I hope you had a fantastic Easter and that you've eaten tons of chocolate, but not that much that you all of a sudden got a sore tummy and things like that. I hope that you've had maybe a little Easter egg hunt. Maybe you've gone around your neighborhood and you've seen lots of other this morning to run it all off again. And I'm really excited to start chapter 14. Only 2 more chapters left. What will happen? I think it's going to get quite exciting from now. Right, are you ready? Chapter 14. Now, let me just carry back for a second. Where were we up to? I think that you remember that they managed to find the opening through which Katla the dragon came out all those years ago. And they managed to get into the cave in all that darkness and find Orva. But they were too late, almost too late. They hacked and managed to get him out of his cage and escape. But will they be caught? That's the question. That night, we carried Orva through the mountain. Jonathan did. He dragged Orva through hell. There was no other way of describing it. I only managed to drag myself, and only just that. "He's gone! He's gone!" they had cried. And when silence fell, we expected them to pursue us, but they didn't. Yet even Tangleman must have been able to reckon that there was a way out of Katla Cavern through which we had gone, and that wouldn't have been all that difficult to find. But they were cowardly, those Tanglemen, daring to face the enemy when in a herd, but not daring to be the first to crawl into a narrow passageway where an unknown enemy was lying in wait. No, they must have been too cowardly, because otherwise why had they let us get away so easily? No one had ever escaped from Katla Cavern before, and how would they explain Orva's flight to Tangle, I wondered. But that was their problem. We had quite enough of our own. Not until we had dragged ourselves through the long, narrow passageway did we dare stop for a while to get our breath back, which we had to for Orva's sake. Jonathan gave him goat's milk, which was now sour, and bread, which was now wet. And even so, Orva said, "I've never had a better meal." Jonathan rubbed Orva's long legs to bring some life back into them, and he did begin to revive, though he still couldn't walk, only crawl. Jonathan told him which way we had to go and asked him if he still wanted to go on that night. "Yes, yes, yes," said Orva. "I will crawl all the way home to Wild Rose Valley if necessary. I don't want to lie here waiting for Tangle's bloodhounds to come howling along the passageways after us." It was already noticeable what he was. No subdued prisoner, but a rebel and a freedom fighter. Orva of Wild Rose Valley. And when I saw his eyes in the light of the lantern, I understood why Tangle was afraid of him. Weak though he was now, he had a kind of burning fire inside him, and it was probably that fire which carried him through that night of hell, for of all the nights in the whole world, none could have been worse. It seemed an eternity full of terrors. But when you're sufficiently exhausted, then you cease to mind anything, not even whether there are bloodhounds after you. Yes, we did hear the hounds coming, howling, baying, but I hadn't the energy to be afraid. Anyhow, they soon fell silent, because not even bloodhounds dared penetrate far into the depths where we were crawling. We crawled along for a long, long time, and when we eventually came out into the daylight by Grim and Fjallar, battered and sore, blood-stained and soaked to the bone, as good as dead with exhaustion, the night was over and the morning was already there. Orva stretched out his arms as if embracing the earth and the sky and everything he could see, but then his eyes fell and he fell asleep. We sank into a coma, all three of us, and knew nothing until it was almost evening. Then I woke. It was Fjallar nudging me with his nose. He no doubt thought I had slept long enough. Jonathan was also awake. "We must get out of Kamanyaka before dark," he said. After dark, we won't be able to find the way." He woke Orva, and when Orva came to life and sat up and looked around and realized that he was no longer in Katla Cavern, tears came to his eyes. "Free," he mumbled, "free." He took Jonathan's hand and held them in his for a long time. "My life and freedom, you've given them back to me," he said, and he thanked me too, although I had done nothing and had mostly been in the way. Orva must have felt much as I had done when I had been released from all pain and had come to Cherry Valley. I longed for him to reach his valley, alive, searching for him. It was fortunate that they hadn't found us sleeping in our crevice. We sat there eating the last of our bread, and after a while Orva said, "Just think that I'm alive, I'm free." For he alone of all the prisoners in Katla Cavern was alive. All the others had been sacrificed one by one to Katla. "But you can trust Tangle," said Orva. "Believe me, he'll see to it that Katla Cavern isn't empty for long." Again, tears came to his eyes. "Oh, Wild Rose Valley of mine," he said, "how much longer will you have to sigh under Tangle?" He wanted to know everything that had happened in the valleys of Nangiala during his imprisonment, about Sophia and Matthias and everything Jonathan had done. Jonathan told him about Jossie too. I thought Orva would die then, right in front of our very eyes, when he heard that he had suffered for so long in Katla Cavern because of Jossie. There was a long pause before he pulled himself together and could speak again, and then he said, "My life means nothing, but what Jossie has done to Wild Rose Valley can never be expiated or forgiven." "Forgiven, or no, he's probably had his punishment by now," said Jonathan. "I don't think you'll ever see Jossie again." But rage had fallen on Orva. He wanted to leave. It was almost as if he wished to start a struggle for freedom that very evening, and he swore at his legs, which carried him so badly, though he tried and at last succeeded in getting up on them. He was quite proud when he was able to show us that, and he was certainly a sight as he stood there, swaying backwards and forwards as if he might be blown over any moment. We had to smile as we watched him. "Orva," said Jonathan, "anyone can see from a long way that you're a prisoner from Katla Cavern." It was true. All three of us were blood-stained and dirty, but Orva looked by far the worst. His clothes in rags, his face scarcely visible because of his beard and hair. Only his eyes were visible, his strange burning eyes. There was a stream running through our crevice, so we rinsed all the dirt and blood off us there. I dipped my face into the cold water again and again. It was wonderful, as if we were rinsing away the whole of Katla Cavern. Then Orva borrowed my knife and cut off a lot of his beard and hair so that he looked less like an escaped prisoner. And Jonathan took out of his pack the Tangle helmet and cloak that had got him out of Wild Rose Valley. "Here, Orva, put these on," he said. "Then perhaps they will think you're a Tangleman who has taken 2 prisoners and you're on your way somewhere with them." Orva put on the helmet and cloak, but he didn't like them. "This is the first and last time I'll ever put on such clothes," he said. "They reek of oppression and cruelty." "Never mind what they reek of," said Jonathan, "as long as they help you get home to Wild Rose Valley." The time had come to leave. In an hour or 2, the sun would set, and then it would be so dark in the mountains that no one would be able to find their way along those dangerous paths. Jonathan was looking serious. He knew what we had to face, and I heard him saying to Orva, "The next 2 hours will decide the fate of Wild Rose Valley, I think. Can you manage to ride for so long?" Yes, said Orva, "for 10 hours if you like." He was to ride Fjallar. Jonathan helped him to mount, and at once he was quite different. Apparently he was growing in the saddle and becoming strong. Yes, Orva was one of those brave, strong people, just like Jonathan. I was the only one who wasn't at all brave. But when we had mounted, and I was sitting there with my arms around Jonathan's waist and my forehead leaning against his back, it was as if a little of his strength came through to me, and I was less afraid. And yet I couldn't help thinking how wonderful it'd be if we didn't have to be strong and brave like this. If only we could be together again, like during those first few days in Cherry Valley. Oh, it seemed so long ago by now. Then we set out on our journey. We rode towards the sunset, as the bridge was in that direction. The paths were so many and confusing in the mountains of Carmanhaca, and no one but Jonathan could have found the right way in such a maze, but he managed in some strange way, fortunately for us. I watched out for Tangleman until my eyes ached, but none appeared. Only Orva riding behind us in his horrible helmet and black cloak. I felt a stab of fear every time I happened to turn my head and see him. So frightened had I become of those helmets and everyone who wore them. We rode and rode, and nothing happened. It was so calm and peaceful and beautiful all the way. A still evening in the mountains, you could call it, I thought. If only it hadn't been so untrue. Anything might appear in all that stillness and peacefulness, and all we felt was a kind of horrible excitement. Even Jonathan was anxious and on his guard every moment. As long as we get to the bridge, he said, then the worst will be over. How soon can we get there? I asked. Within half an hour, if all goes well, said Jonathan. But that was when we saw them. A troop of Tanglemen, 6 men with spears, on black horses, appearing where the path curved round a mountain wall and trotting straight towards us. Now, our lives are at stake, said Jonathan. Move up, Orva! Orva rode quickly up beside us, and Jonathan flung his reins over to him so that we should look a little more like prisoners. They hadn't seen us yet, but it was too late to escape. There was nowhere to escape to either. All we could do was to keep riding, hoping that Orva's cloak and helmet would deceive them. I'll never give myself up alive, said Orva. I want you to know that, Lionheart. As calm as we could, we rode towards our enemies, getting nearer and nearer. Prickles were running down my spine, and I had time to think that if we were caught now, we might as well just have stayed in Cutlack Heaven and avoided being tormented for a long night to no avail. Then we met. They reined in their horses to be able to pass us on the narrow path, and I saw that the leading rider was an old acquaintance, none other than Pack. But Pack didn't look at us. He was only looking at Orva, and just as they passed each other, he said, Have you heard if they found him yet? No, I've heard nothing, said Orva. Where are you going? Said Pack. I've got a couple of prisoners, said Orva. Pack was given no more information, and we rode on as fast as we dared. Turn round carefully, Rusky, and see what they're doing, said Jonathan, and I did as I was asked. They're riding away, I said. Thank goodness, said Jonathan. But he had spoken too soon, for now I saw that they had stopped and were all looking at us. They've begun to think, said Jonathan, and that was clearly what had happened. Stop a moment, shouted Pack. Here, I want to take a closer look at you and your prisoners. Orva clenched his teeth. Ride on, Jonathan, he said, otherwise we're dead men. And we rode on. And then Pack and the whole troop turned round. Yes, they turned and came after us so fast that the manes of their horses were fluttering. Now, Grim, show them what you can do, said Jonathan. And you too, my Fiala, I thought, wishing that I myself was riding him. No one had better steeds than Grim and Fiala, who flew along the path, knowing that it was now a matter of life and death. Our pursuers were behind us. We heard their clattering hoofs, sometimes closer, sometimes further away, but insistent. They did not go away, for now Pack knew whom he was chasing, and no Tangleman could allow such a prey to get away. There would be a great prize to take back to Tangle in his castle. With them at our heels, we galloped over the bridge, and 2 spears came whistling after us, but they did not reach us. Now we were over the Nangiala side, and the worst should be over, Jonathan had said, but on the contrary, I couldn't see that was so. The hunt was continued along the river. High up on the bank, the bridle path leading into Wild Rose Valley twisted and turned, and we raced along it. This was the way we had come on another summer evening that now seemed like 1,000 years ago, when we had come riding along at dusk, Jonathan and I slowly riding on our way to our first campfire. That was how you should travel along rivers, not as now, racing so that the horses almost fell. Orva rode the most wildly because he was riding home to Wild Rose Valley. Jonathan couldn't keep up with him, and Pack was catching up on us too. I couldn't think why until I realized it was because of me. There was no swifter rider than Jonathan, and no one would ever have been able to catch up with him had he been alone on the horse. But now he had to think of me all the time, and that hindered him. This ride was to decide the fate of Wild Rose Valley, Jonathan had said, and I would be the one to decide how it would end. So terrible was it. It would end badly. I became more and more sure of that. Every time I turned round to look, those black helmets were a little closer, sometimes hidden behind a hillock, some trees, but then inexorably there again, nearer and nearer. Jonathan knew it as well as I did, that we could not save ourselves now, not both of us, and it was necessary that Jonathan got away. I couldn't let him be captured because of me, so I said, Jonathan, do as I say now. Throw me off round a corner where they can't see and catch up with Orva. I saw that he was astonished at first, but not nearly as astonished as I was. Would you really dare? Said Jonathan. No, but I want to do it all the same, I said. Brave little Rusky, he said. I'll come back and fetch you. As soon as I've got Orva safe with Matthias, I'll come back. Promise? I said. Yes, what do you think? He said. We had reached the willow tree where we had bathed, and I said, I will hide in our tree. Fetch me from there. I didn't have to say more, for now we were hidden behind a hillock, and Jonathan reined in his horse so that I could slide down, and then he set off again, and I rolled quickly aside into a hollow. I lay there listening to the soldiers thundering past. I saw Park's stupid face for a brief moment. He was snarling as if ready to bite, and Jonathan had saved the man's life. But Jonathan had already caught up with Orva. I saw them disappearing together, and I was pleased. Ride on, old Park, I thought. If you think that helps, you'll see no more of Jonathan and Orva. I stayed in the hollow until Park and his men were also out of sight. Then I scrambled down to the river and my tree. It was good to crawl into the green center of the tree and settle into a forked branch, because I was tired now. There was a little rowing boat bumping against the bank just by the tree. It must have torn itself loose from its moorings higher up the river, as it was not tied up. Whoever had lost it would be sad now, I thought, as I sat there looking round and wondering about this and that. I looked at the rushing water and Park's rock, and thought that out there was where he should be sitting, that cowardly Park. And I saw Cutler Mountain on the other side of the river, and I wondered how any man could imprison other people in its terrible caves. I thought about Orva and Jonathan, and longed so that it ached that they would escape into our underground passage before Park caught up with them. I wondered too, what Matthias, oops, I got a fright from my own phone. Oh, I can't do that now. There we go. I gave myself a big fright there. Okay. I stayed in the hollow until Park and his men were also... Oh, I already read that. There we go. I longed so that I ached that they would escape into our underground passage before Park caught up with them. I wondered, too, what Matthias would say when he found Orvar in his hideout. How glad would he be? All that I said and I thought about. But dusk began to fall, and then I realized that I would perhaps have to spend the whole night here. Jonathan wouldn't have time to get back before dark. It was creepy, and anxiety began to crawl over me as dusk fell. I felt very lonely. And then suddenly I saw a woman riding along high up on the riverbank. And it was none other than Sophia. Yes, indeed, it was Sophia. And never have I been so pleased to see her as that moment. Sophia! I cried. Sophia! Here I am! I crawled out of the tree and waved my arms. But it was a long time before I could make her understand that it really was me. But Carl, she said, how did you get here? And where is Jonathan? Wait a minute. While we come down to you, we must water the horses anyhow. And then I saw two men behind her, also mounted. I recognized the first, Hubert, and the other one was hidden. But then he rode up and I saw him. It was Jossie. But it couldn't be Jossie. I thought perhaps I had gone mad and I was seeing things. Sophia couldn't have come here with Jossie. What had gone wrong? Was Sophia mad too? Or had I just dreamt that Jossie was a traitor? No. I hadn't dreamt it. He was a traitor. I wasn't seeing things. Here he was. And what would happen now? He came riding down towards the river in the half-light, and he called from a distance. Well, look who's there, little Carl Lionheart, that we should meet again. All three of them came down, and I stood still, waiting for them with only one thought in my head. Help! What will happen now? They jumped down from their horses, and Sophia came running up to me and flung her arms around me, so glad that her eyes were shining. Are you out hunting wolves again? Said Hubert, laughing. But I stood there without speaking, just staring. Where are you going? I managed to get out at last. Jossie is going to show us where we can get best through the wall, said Sophia. We must know for when the battle actually starts. Yes, we must, said Jossie. We must have a plan ready before we attack. I was seething inwardly. No doubt you've got your plan ready, I thought. I knew why he had come. He was going to lure Sophia and Hubert into a trap, straight to destruction. He would lure them if no one stopped him. And then I understood. Help. I am the one who must do that. And it couldn't wait. It had to happen right now. However much I disliked the idea of it, it had to happen now. But how should I begin? How's Bianca, Sophia? I said at last. Sophia looked sad. Bianca never came back from Wildrose Valley, she said. But do you know anything about Jonathan? She didn't want to talk about Bianca, but I had heard what I wanted to know. Bianca was dead. That was why Sophia had come here with Jossie. She had never received our message. Jossie wanted to know too whether I knew anything about Jonathan. Surely he hasn't been captured, he said. No, he hasn't, I said, and I looked straight into Jossie's eyes. He's just rescued Orvar from Cutler Cavern. Jossie's red face turned pale, and he fell silent. But Sophia and Hubert were delighted. Oh, they were so happy that Sophia hugged me again, and Hubert said, That's the best news you could have given us. They wanted to know how it had all been done, but Jossie didn't, because now he was in a hurry. We can all hear about that later, he said. We must go to where we're heading for now, before dark. Yes, because Tangle's soldiers will no doubt be lying in wait, I thought. Come, Carl, said Sophia. We can ride together on my horse, you and me. No, I said. You mustn't ride anywhere with that traitor. I pointed at Jossie, and I thought he would kill me. He grabbed hold of my neck with his great hands and snarled, What did you say? One more word, and I'll finish you. Sophia made him let me go, but she wasn't pleased with me. Carl, it's dreadful to call a person a traitor when it isn't true, but you're too young to know what you've just said. Hubert just laughed quietly. I thought I was the traitor, he said. I, who know so much and like white horses, or whatever it was you wrote on the kitchen wall. Yes, Carl, you hurl your accusations in all directions, said Sophia sternly. You must stop doing that. I'm sorry, Hubert, I said. Well, what about Jossie? Said Sophia. I won't say sorry for calling a traitor, I said. But I couldn't get them to believe me. It was dreadful when I realized that. They wanted to go on with Jossie. They were wishing on themselves their own misfortune, whatever I tried to do to stop them. But he's leading you into a trap, I cried. I know he is. I know. Just believe me. Ask him. Ask him about Vidar and Kader, whom he meets up with in the mountains, and ask him how he betrayed Orva. Josta looked as if he wanted to rush at me again, but he controlled himself. Can't we get going now, he said, or are we to risk everything because of this boy's lies? He gave me a look full of hatred. And I liked you once, he said. I said, I liked you once, he said, and I liked you too, I said, and I could see how scared he was beneath his rage. He really was in a hurry now because he had to have Sophia captured and imprisoned before the truth dawned on her. Otherwise, it would be his own life in question. What a relief it must have been to him that Sophia didn't want to know the truth. She didn't believe me. She trusted Jossie and had always done so, and I, who had accused first one person and then another, how could she believe me? Come on now, Carl, she said. I'll sort all of this out with you later. There'll be no later if you go with Jossie, I said. And then I cried. I was frustrated. Nangiala could not afford to lose Sophia, and here I was unable to save her because she didn't want to be saved. Come on, Carl, she repeated obstinately. But then I remembered something. Jossie, I said, open your shirt and show them what you've got on your chest. Jossie turned so deathly pale that even Sophia and Hubert noticed. He put his hand on his chest, and as if wishing to protect something. There was a brief silence, but then Hubert said in a harsh voice, Jossie, do as the boy says. We must hurry, he said, moving towards his horse. Sophia's eyes hardened. Not so much hurry, she said. I'm your leader, Jossie. Now show me your chest. It was terrible to see Jossie then, standing there panting, paralyzed, afraid, but not knowing whether to flee or stay. Sophia went up to him, but he thrust her aside with his elbow. He shouldn't have done that. She caught hold of him and tore open his shirt, and there, on his chest, was the Katla mark. A dragon's head it was, glistening like blood. Sophia turned even paler than Jossie. Traitor, she said. Curses on your head for what you have done to Nangiala's valleys. At last, Jossie sprang to life. He swore and rushed over towards his horse, but Hubert was there before him. So he turned, looking wildly around for another escape route, and caught sight of the rowing boat. With one single leap, he was into it, and before Sophia or Hubert could even get to the bank, the current had already taken him out of their reach. And then he laughed. It was a horrible laugh. I'll punish you, Sophia, he cried. When I come as chieftain of Cherry Valley, then I will punish you. You poor fool. You'll never get to Cherry Valley, I thought. You will get to Karma Falls and nowhere else. He tried to row, but raging waves and whirlpools caught the boat and tossed it between them, trying to crush it, tearing the oars from his hands. And then a hissing wave came and tipped him into the water. I cried when I saw that, wanting to save him, although he was a traitor, but I knew there was no way of saving Jossie. It was so terrible and so sad to stand there in the dusk, watching and knowing that Jossie was quite alone and helpless out there in the swirling waters. We saw him come up once on the crest of a wave, and then he sank again, and we saw no more of him. It was almost dark now as the river of the ancient rivers took Jossie and carried him off to Karma Falls. Wow, what a chapter, guys. I was excited reading it. I hope that you were excited listening to this. Tomorrow, the very last chapter of this book. I'll see you soon. We will be sending out your planning for this week. Lots of learning happening. I hope you enjoy what Miss Shin and I have organized for you. You can always email us. You can even ring me if you like. And tomorrow another day, and I'll read you another chapter of this story. Bye.